Dominus illuminatio mea, et salus mea, quem timebo. Dominus defensor vitae meae, ac trepidabo, qui tribula me, inimici mei, infirmatis udeciderunt. Si consistant adversum me castra, non timem incomeum. Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto, sicut erat in principio et nunc et semper, et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. The Sea of Galilee to this day can still be the scene of tempest and danger. When one is there, either on the water or beside it, looking at the unchanged sky and sea, hearing the unchanged noise of the ripples, one transports oneself to the presence of the Lord. When he was giving the word, there must have been a great stillness around. The tempest at that time was not there. There was enough stillness for him to be away from the land, sitting in the boat as a master in authority, for the teacher sits. And for them to be in a state of attention, probably a good few hundred of them, with the microphone, just the voice, and attentive ears. Far more attentive minds as well than our own, for words were precious then. I would like to zoom into this question of the way in which these people, and amongst them these 4 chosen, were able to be moved more easily than we. They left everything and followed him at that point. They were, in some way, gazing at the majesty that was there without knowing what it was. They had an intuition, there's something hugely other here. And this gaze did the same again, a little later on, to an unexpected candidate, Levi, sitting at the customs seat, waiting for these horrid taxes to come in. He just said, "Follow me." And he left everything and followed him. What have these in common? There were 2 things. The power of the syllables coming through the air and reaching their mind and soul, and the grace somehow emanating from the person. It's the same for us. The Word has come down. The Word is there waiting to act. It's in potential mode of activity when the Bible is closed. When, with an open heart and mind, we get on our knees and ask the Holy Spirit for a word and ask him to breathe upon it as he breathes upon the element of the canon of the Mass, then they can ignite. And that word, finding a still soul, can have an effect. Also, the grace is still there. It's hugely powerful when there's a still assembly, open, prepared, and genuinely attentive. both these actions of God in word and presence, when they find the contrary, cannot act. And as one looks around, much of the encounters of souls in the Emerald Isle on a Saturday evening and Sunday, one questions oneself, is there stillness in the air? Is the word sufficiently opened up? 5 minutes is one thing. 10 or 15 of opening up, breaking the word and challenging is another. If more of that had been happening in the last 30 years, this last vote would not have gone so easily to the other camp. But the other issue there is also questionable. The very fact that there's a horror in the air for any form of stillness, and its exclusion immediately by anything which speeds up the most holy moment of communion, is a great victory for the hater of the soul, who wants to make sure that no real encounter happens for the Christian people at the altar of God, that man is met by man and God is hardly thought of. I remember in childhood, one Sunday, when staying as we would in the country, in Wales, in the holidays, with our grandparents, we would go to chapel once, twice, or 3 times, depending how many things were going on in the chapel in the day. And I remember one Sunday morning, it was very rare in those days for us to have an English service, but this English student for the ministry came. They used to do that in the holidays, they'd go around. And I remember listening to what he had to say. He preached on the call of Levi. And to this day, I remember what he said. And I looked at him, a young, handsome man, and his being radiated somehow what it is to be in love with Jesus Christ, and the word coming from a person buzzed and had an effect. The word from the heart hitting the heart, it does actually have that effect, whereas something read is something cerebral, mental and intellectual. There is another mode without human intervention at all. It is when a soul, secretly pulled by some nudge and pull, steps aside and goes to a quiet church, and alone, eye to eye, watches and waits. Many calls have come in those quiet moments of souls who come apart with nothing human at all, but only the density of a presence. Churches speak, the presence touches, and the word comes out of nowhere, occasionally even actually in a supernatural way. A good few years ago now, there was the son of important communists in Poland, a complete atheist, who for some reason just got into a church on a busy road one day. And he'd hardly got his foot in the door. There was exposition going on, and something from the host, and it was audible in his soul, said, "I exist, and you will be my priest." He came back the next day, and he felt also something nearly as powerful, but coming down a bit, because the first one had had its effect. He went to the bishop and said, "I want to be a priest." The bishop knew of his background and was skeptical. He kept him on the long finger. No, I know what I want. I must be a priest. And the bishop sat back in amazement and saw that the Lord was at work. I heard that he'd since become one of the best priests in Poland. In our abbey in Italy, we had a lot of people coming to us to come apart and rest a while, to have a word and to be followed. Some were discerning, some were already in formation. But that combination was enough. No human for a few days, only contact with him. But that contact has its conditions. One, not too much attention to the other guests around. Two, no contact at all with the outside world through a message or a phone call. And in practice, that means, hard and impossible though it may seem, life without the telephone on for a few days. The day is quite different when the telephone is off, because if one goes through the day available, one has the itch to catch up, and one is not alone. One is plugged into someone else, and one has not that availability to the Holy Spirit which one has with no other voice but the silent voice of the page and the buzz of the Blessed Sacrament. I leave you with one challenge. This morning, just before you came, I baptized a very quiet child here at this ancient font, which, as you know, was found underground, hidden from the Cromwellian soldiers. A very quiet child and a quiet family. We sent the child on to glory with the passport. Just the other day, I was called urgently to a hospital in Dublin to anoint a dear friend, actually younger than myself, who seems to be in serious danger, already actually beginning to face certain issues, but well prepared. And it hit me. We think when we start on this journey, and when we're young, that we have all the time in the world. In articulo mortis, in the article of death, we have a different vision of things. And then we see what many hours on the mobile phone were worth, compared with many hours before the tabernacle. What many hours in idle gossip were worth, compared with many hours in spiritual books and quiet rosaries. What many hours in, let's say it, taking away the character of other people, losing one's temper, wasting time on idle watching of the television is worth, compared with fully on mode in every second of our existence until time burns out forever. Quietness gives quality. Interiority is the bliss of the soul, not what gives it a high. Just by chance this week, I found an interesting testimony. It was what George Harrison had answered when questioned about drugs. He said, quite honestly, why people got into them. There's a pain in their soul. There's a pain in life, and one tries to dumb and numb the pain. And then he went on to explain how people, and he wasn't of their number, would go to the highest of all, heroin. He explained it's basically the same. It gets you to that you need, the high, but more quickly and more powerfully. But it also kills you. But then he added this unexpected reflection. It would be better, he said, not to have any, because nature is the highest of all. In other words, he regretted that he'd lost the simple bliss of unaccentuated sweetness. The good things that are there in the soul in a state of grace are far better than those lost in seeking consolation in the void. Napoleon, one day, at the height of his military career, was asked, Napoleon, what was the happiest moment of your day, or rather, the happiest day of your life? And without blinking an eyelid, immediately he answered, Le jour de ma première communion, the day of my first communion. Innocence and quietness give us access to bliss, and all the rest is too much noise.
Quiet. Our life were but a simple game to play today, were it well studied and well known. Our life is all of nothing, blown away into a myriad parts, not one its own. Our life is doubly used and ill abused, are moments in their coming where they go into their frittered firing, ever fused in their once charged power, an hour to glow. Our life is many moments never held, for that we held too many when they came. And life was never known, for ne'er beheld was this one ancient truth that stands the same upon the tomb of living that we were. For living was best lived when less did stir.